Welcome to episode 41, friends. Please make use of closed captioning to better follow what I'm saying. You know, the other day, the birthday of someone I viewed as a friend for years came up, and I debated whether to send him a greeting. I felt weird thinking I had to be wondering whether to wish him happy birthday, and that led me to considering why that was so and also whether I should still call him a friend. Because these days, in particular since I started with my blog, I've, I've become very circumspect with regard who I refer to as a friend. I've started using words like acquaintance or someone I know, somebody I know, when referring to people I used to simply call friends. This particular person, who I'll call Jerry to protect his privacy, was someone who I've known for almost 20 years. The prior year, I'd given him a nice expensive gift as he achieved a milestone birthday. But we had barely spoken in the past year since, and not at all in the last 4 months or so before his recent birthday. Why? Well, let me explain with honesty, but while honoring people's privacy. Both Jerry and I knew this other person, who I'll call Peter, who I've come to view as a hateful, lying, obnoxious loudmouth who likes to scandalize people. Peter is also a parasitic leech, the definition of a user. That's a real nasty person, right? Yes, definitely. I think he has a major personality problem that caused him to become friends with people, learn their secrets and foibles, and then publicly betray their confidence. Such a person cannot cohabit any workplace, and thus, for as long as I've known him, I've also never known him to last in the same job as much as a whole year. When I look back at the situation, I ask myself, how could you have been friends with that person? Because for the first 2 years or so after we met, about 20 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have told you he was a friend of mine. I was living in the US and Peter was living in Jamaica when we first met. On one of my many trips to the island, a friend of his had asked me to take something to give to him. After that, I checked him whenever I visited Jamaica, which in those days was 3 or 4 times per year, and we would hang out a lot. He'd often accompany me on road trips around the island to visit various relatives, and I appreciated his company for those travels. Through Peter, I met 3 persons in particular who became what I then considered friends of mine: Jerry, Charles, and Steve. Peter eventually migrated to the United States and was married for a while until I suspect his wife, like most of the people who spent any significant amount of time around him, just couldn't stand him anymore. After he and I essentially stopped talking, I'd only see him from time to time at certain events where there were large gatherings of Jamaicans, like at the annual pen relays in Philadelphia. I haven't seen Peter in perhaps 5 years, but I do remember the last time I saw him, he was being the same venom-spewing loudmouth that I and most of his acquaintances had come to know him to be. I can say it wasn't just me who thought of him that way, because in conversations I had with Jerry, Charles, and Steve, and others in later years, the topic of Peter's nastiness often came up. In fact, like me, Steve and Charles eventually completely cut Peter off and avoided all contact with him. Steve unfortunately died of cancer not too long ago. Charles lives in a southern state, and recently I've stopped calling or texting Charles as well. This was after I visited him in a city where he lives, and for the first time in a while we hung out for a few days. The problem is that by the end of those days, I got to realize that Charles, though he too had cut Peter from his life, was in many ways, in terms of character, just a mini version of Peter. I can't hate him, but now he's just not somebody I want to be around anymore. I can no longer consider him a friend. Then, a week after my visit with Charles, it was Jerry's birthday, and I was left wondering whether to call him or not. So I thought of why we hadn't spoken in so long. One main reason is that when I was composing one of my blog episodes about friendship and trust, I was thinking of something that happened a couple years ago when I was hanging out with Jerry, where I felt he didn't protect me from a detrimental situation. And when I brought up the incident with him some months ago, I did not believe his explanation. But the second key reason was that Jerry is still close friends with Peter. He admits that Peter is a nasty person, but then laughs it off when we hear stories of Peter's latest misdeeds. And the last two times he and I spoke, he asked me about Peter and encouraged me to contact him. The first of those two times I reminded him of the type of person we knew Peter to be and detailed why I wanted nothing to do with Peter. Yet the next time we spoke, he brought up the topic of my contacting Peter again. I didn't mince words in rehashing why I held Peter in such low regard and wanted nothing more to do with him. I've always known that Jerry was still friends with Peter, but I ignored the issue until those calls where he tried to have me reconnect with Peter. That, coupled with the harmful situation and me not believing his explanation that he had not broken my trust, made me reflect on my relationship with Jerry. After the last call with him, I asked myself, how can I be close to someone who is close to someone else we both acknowledge to be a hateful, venom-spewing loudmouth? The answer is, I can't. So I stopped calling or texting Jerry, and he stopped calling or texting me too, and I became comfortable with that. So when his birthday came, I wondered whether to send him a greeting. It's like I would be renewing contact with somebody who I felt I could no longer trust or feel close to, but with whom I'd spent many enjoyable times hanging out over almost 2 decades. In the end, I text Jerry a happy birthday greeting. A month later, I hadn't heard back from him, and I figured that was because he no longer wanted to talk to me, period. Then a couple of weeks ago, a week after my own birthday, I got a belated birthday greeting text from him. I responded with a thank you, and he said okay, and we haven't communicated since. I wonder a bit now whether Jerry and Charles think I'm an asshole, not worth their friendship. And I wonder whether I've thrown away decades-old friendships with Charles and Jerry over silly moralistic nonsense. But then I think about how these days more and more I remember that quote my mother used to remind me of. Show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. And I'm comfortable with that.